on and get started. Go on and get started. Uh, Again, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today for another wonderful, informative, all that nerd session. It's brought to you today by our wonderful Center for K-12 Black History and Racial Literacy Education through GSE at UB. We offer space for teachers uh, pre-K through 12th grade and beyond to learn effective ways to teach and learn Black history and race. And we offer certainly ways for you to continue to contribute and learn how to contribute in the areas of research, professional development, networking, advocacy, consulting, and so forth. Um, some of our lovely members are of the center, our fellows, grad fellows, Donovan, Daphne, and Abigail, and our wonderful assistant, administrative assistant Hannah is pictured here. I'm also pictured here, but I realized, Dr. King, I wanted to mention to you earlier, you're not pictured here, but our director is Dr. LeGarrette King. And we have a couple more nerd sessions coming up this spring. One with Dr. Natasha Henry Dixon in April, so April 11th, and then followed up by May by our future Dr. Daphne Bibbs. Excited for those sessions. We hope you can join us then as well. And also, we have going on concurrently, well, I guess at the same time. So we also have right now our Spring 26 book club where we're reading I'll Make Me a World, the 100-Year Journey of Black History Month by Jarvis Givens. And our facilitator is Monica Reed. So we have meetings on the 14th, the 21st, 28th, and April 4th. And so we really hope you can join us for one or all of our book club meetings. It's a great text and space for great discussion. And we have our micro credential, Teaching Black History micro credential. This is a 1-year micro credential. The cost is, I want to say, only $1,500, but right about now that's a lot, I know, but it's worth it. Our instructors are Abigail Henry and Janiyah Hoover, and we're currently accepting applications for the fall 2026 cohort, and we'll be hosting an informational on March 24th. You can also find information on the website. And our Teaching Black History Conference is coming up. We're excited about that. We received a lot of proposals. Some of you on our session today may have submitted proposals, and so we look forward to sending out letters. Those will be out by early next week. I'm reading here. So again, the conference itself will be held 2 days this time, so July 24th and July 25th, and the cost is $125. You can visit the website for hotel information as well as all conference information. And we are excited to learn more about Black founders, our mothers and fathers, and teaching about Black founders. And our keynote speaker, really excited to hear and learn from Michael Harriot, an award-winning journalist and best-selling author of the New York Times bestseller, Black AF History, The Unwhitewashed Story of America. He is the 2024-25 recipient of Harvard University's Nyhan Prize for Public Policy Journalism. And he's also the founder of the Black Journalism Collective, contrabandcamp.com. Harriet holds degrees in mass communications and history from Auburn University, and a master's degree in macroeconomics and international business from Florida State University. So we're again excited to have him as our keynote for the conference and excited to learn with and from him. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce today's Nerds presenter. So, I'm sorry, here we go. Dr. Tiffany, please forgive me, Tiffany, Nyachae?
Nyachae.
Nyachae. I'm so sorry. Nyachae. Uh, Dr. Tiffany Nyachae is an assistant professor of education and women's gender and sexuality studies at Penn State and a 2023 NA Spencer postdoctoral fellow, a Black feminist, pedagogue, and community engaged scholar. Her research uses critically conscious, humanizing approaches to examine race, literacy, learning environments, and social justice with a focus on Black girls and urban teachers. And she is a UB alum, so we welcome her back into to again teach and learn with us in community. She earned her PhD from here at University of Buffalo, so welcome. And I'll turn it over to. I'm going to stop sharing. I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you everyone for being here. So many people I love. And I'm gonna hurry up and jump right in. I just wanna prepare you. Wait, let me reshare and click the sound this time. I just want to prepare you for the fact that I am reading a little bit off um a script, and I hope that doesn't put you off, but I talk a lot, and I go on tangents, and so I want to really get my points across. So I need to like stick to a little bit of a script, but I will still be personable, okay? Okay, so I'm going to get started. Um so my talk today, I don't know if I should call it a talk. This is a class. My lesson today, this is a lesson. The lesson today is what did Black educators already teach us about reading instruction, exposing paucity in the science of reading and other approaches? And I want to make that very clear, not just the science of reading, but other approaches to literacy instruction. In 2024, I attended the fall retreat and annual meeting of the National Academy of Education as a postdoctoral fellow. The closing session consisted of a panel discussion on how research on the science of reading and the next generation science standards is utilized in policy and practice. Because this was not just about research, in addition to researchers and scholars, other knowledge producers, organizational leaders, and users of this research were on the panel. For instance, the panel included a school superintendent as well as Emily Hanford, the senior correspondent, producer, and host of the podcast, Sold a Story. Airing in October 2022, this podcast of investigative reporting rapidly gained popularity among the public, policymakers, and educators. It, along with other media outlets, offered the following reasons for the high illiteracy rates among U.S. children. One reason is teachers have not been taught research based approaches to teach reading and are therefore teaching reading incorrectly. Another reason is that teachers do not teach phonics because they find it to be boring. And even though research shows that young children need explicit phonics instructions in order to learn how to read, they still don't do it. Number three, teachers were sold a story by prominent literacy researchers in programs that explicit phonics instruction is not necessary. And if children engage in the behaviors of readers and are immersed with text, then they will magically learn to read. And the fourth one is that the science of reading is based on real scientific evidence and is a solution to the nation's illiteracy problem, characterizing it almost solely as teaching decoding skills through phonics instruction. Such media narratives is the reason why 40 states and DC have passed legislation or either passed or implemented legislation mandating the science of reading or evidence-based reading instruction. We'll come back to this later. While I was sitting as an audience member watching this panel, what was most striking to me as an audience member was that there were no Black scholars, researchers, organizational leaders, or educators on this panel. I say this because Black students were certainly implicated in the discussion. The Soda Story podcast host, Emily Hanford, even included an image of her working with a Black student in her color evasive presentation with no mention of why this, how and why this student was there or what she was doing. I guess the visual representation was enough. It's interesting how time and time again, Black students are the face of the reading crisis, and yet Black people are often not included as knowledge producers in these important conversations. Essentially, our knowledges and expertise on teaching students how to read, especially Black students, are not even considered or explored. When of course, I had to raise my hand and have a comment when the comments were open. So when I asked or called the panel to consult the knowledges and cultural practices of people of color in their work, in the same way they display deficit statistical data on the reading proficiency rates of Black children, a couple of the panelists defensively named the Black organizations that they work with. Oh yeah, we work with this organization, and they help us with Black students and I understood this to mean that they had checked the box of representative inclusion, but could not respond to my question of Black knowledge, expertise, and dare I say, Black sciences of reading. The reading achievement of Black students is often cited as deficient and representative of a larger reading crisis in the United States to advance the science of reading and other mainstream approaches to reading instruction. Yet, Black educators' historical and contemporary reading expertise and practices with Black students are not seriously studied or even considered in prevailing debates around effective instructional methods for reading proficiency. So you can see where um, Black students, where we lie, we're circled is circled in red on the chart. You can also see that everyone likes to say, um, it was the pandemic, it was the pandemic. And yes, we did see a little bit of dip, but it's not that much difference when we see where we find. And this is the national, um, this is the NAEP test. That is a state assessments like the nation's report card so that we can do state to state comparisons. And it's a more comprehensive literacy exam. That's these scores. And they usually test a representative sample. So every student is not tested, but a representative samples of students are tested in fourth and eighth grade to give us this data. Black teachers had to employ subversive approaches to enhance these mainstream approaches to reading to ensure that our babies learned to read and achieved. To illustrate, in the 1980s and 90s, there was a preoccupation among Black scholars advancing culturally relevant and culturally responsive pedagogy with the reading achievement of Black and Brown students. And I think those of us in my generation of scholars, like we've heard about this, we come up with this, we'd be like, we get it. But we have to go back and remember that to understand what's happening today and to place us in these conversations. And even when I attend these panels that claim to be concerned about improving the reading achievement of Black and Brown students in the working class or experiencing poverty, I do not see our expertise or what some would call the real literacy work. Okay. And I think this is important. So there are literacy scholars, even those of them who are like against the science of reading and more into the more other approaches that consider certain things to be the real literacy work. And so they would call like phonics instruction and comprehension and all that. That's the real literacy work, not the race stuff, the political social justice stuff, not the diversity stuff, as some do not believe that that is the real literacy work. It's just, you could add it. I guess you can add it in. But I would argue that that is the real literacy work. But I'm also here to point out that Black scholars and educators also hold expertise in phonics instruction and comprehension and the like. And we need to do a better job of including their methods processes and sciences in how we understand reading instruction. Let me see. I don't think I'm here yet. No. Ooh, just wait for it. Okay. So, as a classroom teacher, I was a classroom teacher in the 2000s, probably like 2006 ish, dating myself. Um, and this school that I taught in served mostly working class Black students, and it followed the balanced literacy approach. Also, the reading workshop school that the Soda Story podcast critiqued. And while I was there in that program, I noticed and I loved that children were reading real books during independent reading time. There was dedicated independent reading time, and they were receiving one-on-one reading conferences with teachers. I love the read alouds, which I don't really hear about read alouds anymore, and I'm concerned about that. However, I also noticed that students who needed more explicit instruction tended to fall through the cracks if their teacher did not have the expertise to pivot when necessary. Even so, these programs were very Eurocentric, color evasive, presented as apolitical, and often not equipped to provide, did not equip teachers to provide explicit instruction on various reading approaches. I wouldn't even just say phonics. I would say even some comprehension stuff. I remember there being a preoccupation with teaching strategies versus the actual skill. I know strategies, we use strategies to get to the skill, but I used to be like, okay, but what about the actual skill? And what do we do when students have mastered that skill? Are we still just keep do we still just keep teaching them strategies? So that was something that I noticed. Teachers who did provide explicit instruction were often considered to be outdated, even those of us who were actually trained as literacy specialists and clinicians. I remember I had convinced, we had a group of students one year who a significant number of our seventh and eighth graders were reading below reading level, and we wanted to support them in their reading. So myself and another teacher had decided we'll do some diagnostic testing. We'll create individualized program. We were trained as literacy clinicians, and during our last period of the day, how about we take those kids? All the other kids can go to the other teacher, and we will work with them. This is extra work. This is no extra pay. This is like extra planning. And it was knocked down because we needed to follow the reading and writing workshop. And I think at that moment that really changed something in me because I was like, and there were aspects I loved about the reading rights, but I was like, oh, y'all not really like, okay, so this is not really about supporting kids in these ways. And it really broke my heart. So still, we provided myself and other Black teachers did provide explicit reading instruction subversively to supplement the program, as well as incorporating justice oriented purposes for reading. Our practices were not new because Black teachers have always done this. But I didn't learn about this in school in my programs. In fact, Black students in segregated schools, not the segregated schools of today, but the legally segregated schools had higher achievement rates than we saw later on. So we're gonna go here. So what was happening in reading instruction in African American segregated schools from 1940 to 1970? And I want you to pay attention to this 30-year span because of I want you to remember what was collected when we think about histories and archives and the archive and all of these records and what records were even collected, and what and why we don't have information before 1940 a lot because when we did start to get these histories, these teachers were older when a lot of them were older and people are interviewing them. It's not like at the time they weren't valued enough for people to study what they were doing with Black children at the time. And so I'll get to that in a minute. So in this picture over here to the side, you can see Sarah L. Murphy. She's teaching reading to children in a 2-room schoolhouse in Rockmart, Georgia in 1950. Okay, so we're going to keep her in mind, this image of her with students gathered around her. So what was happening with reading? The beginning reading instruction was basal readers, or those are like reading textbooks leveled according to grade, by grade, such as the Dick and Jane readers. Some of you may be old enough to remember those. That had gone when I had came along. So, but we still had basal readers, but just not the Dick and Jane. And these were handed down from white schools in horrible condition. However, I think this is important. They did not have the teachers editions. They didn't get the teacher manuals that would kind of provide you with a script. They had to put it together themselves. They had to teach themselves. So they weren't given that. Some teachers, very few teachers would purchase it themselves, but many teachers didn't have the resources to do that and they just made it work. Black teachers in segregated schools supplemented mainstream text with alternative text, assisted and they assisted students in using public and school libraries. And this is very important considering that even in 1960, less than 29% of elementary schools had school libraries, even had. So they're still using these, they're doing all this with them. Some schools had library clubs or the literacy societies that Gholdy Muhammad illuminates in her work. So some schools had that. And although rote memorization, so we have a, I hope I can have you expand how we think about rote memorization in a black context by the time we get done. But rote memorization and recitation was a common practice at this time. Black teachers also discussed the ways the text is related to the reader. um and when people go back and they get information about what black teachers were doing, they'll say, oh well, obviously they were influenced by the progressive movement, like they got that from other people. Or you'll see something that, oh yeah, that's very doing, they got that from them. But I'm not convinced, because they weren't welcomed in those spaces. um white thinkers of the time could probably come into our spaces before we can go into their spaces. So I don't know. And similarly, in his book Fugitive Pedagogy, Givens observes that although W.E.B. Du Bois is categorized as a progressive era intellectual and education, he was not welcomed in those spaces at that time. They didn't respect him. They didn't value his work. And I think we got to remember that when our credit, our expertise is like just given to somebody else. As for black educators in segregated schools, they were continuing to offer a liberal arts education to students and reading classical literature. And so, liberal arts education, you get a little bit of history, a little bit of English, a little bit of math. You get like all of these subjects, philosophy, maybe some religious studies. When the public schools moving towards the progressive era had pretty much abandoned it. Okay. And they also would find texts with positive representations of Black people. We know that those resources were limited for some time before 1940, especially children's literature, but over time, those increased and they would use those. They did engage in ability level grouping, which was to that time. They also engage in a diagnosis of reading level for the purpose of diagnostic teaching. And I think this is different than how we understand reading levels. Like, this is your reading level in reading and writing workshop, and that's it. But it's like, I need to know this so that I can start somewhere with you. I'm not going to keep you there, but I'm going to know where to start with you to push you, right? And um and they also did individualized instruction. And I think that's very important. That's very different from the individual reading conferences that we see in reading and writing workshop, where you're coming around and you're like, it's almost like the work of a literacy clinician and a literacy specialist, even though you're a teacher, and you're doing all of that in a classroom where you're creating a individualized instructional plan for your students who need extra support. But we don't hear about this, right? We didn't know, we don't hear nothing about any of this. Um, and at this time, teachers reported that most of their students could read, except and read well, except maybe two or three with if they had severe mental disabilities, which is understandable, right? Beyond this, we do not know exactly what occurred during reading instruction. It is our responsibility, and this is what I hope to do, to research, as Cynthia Dillard would say, the archives for Black approaches to reading instruction. And we must look for what's there and what's not there to remember and recover silenced and erased Black sciences of reading. Okay. So then we get to 1970, and by 1970, desegregation has taken is really in full steam just about. with the so over a decade after the 1954 Brown decision to desegregate schools, over 60% of Black students attended integrated schools. Integration resulted in many Black teachers and administrators being pushed out of schools, leaving Black children with white teachers who had no experience in teaching Black children, and many of whom fought against the integration of white schools. And Black children were to learn from these teachers. Okay. So what happens is I found this artifact. I hope my historians appreciate my I'm not a real legit historian, but but I'm really proud of this artifact that I found. So you see this so you have over 60% of students in school, and then you have this Dr. Marion Lee Vick. She's a professor at the HBCU, North Carolina Agriculture and Technical State University, and she presents this paper at the International Reading Association, which is huge. It was just really huge then. Now we have a lot of different literacy organizations, but that was like the main literacy organization. Um, Critical issues in reading instruction among Black educators and students, personnel and training. And basically, she's like, listen, I'm sick of you saying that. She's like, all of these Black students are not now magically need to be classified as special ed students and unable to learn and all these things ever since schools have been desegregated. Also, um the teachers are whack. That's essentially what she's saying is like, you're teaching all these skills, you're okay at doing that, there's no creativity, there's no imagination, you're not even sensitive to the needs of Black children. And she's pushing on the professional development of teachers. Like, you need to analyze your craft, you need to improve your craft, and you need to do what you need to do to teach better to these students. And so I think this is an important touchstone for the sentiment of many Black educators who either were in the schools or outside of schools or been displaced from schools, and what they were seeing happening to Black students in reading instruction. Okay. So now we're going to talk about Marva Collins. And I'm going to tell you this, it angers me to no end that whether you agree or disagree, and I'm talking to the Black folks in the room, whether you like everything about her approach or you don't like it, and we could break it apart, that she is not even a part of the conversation with the science of reading or with phonics instruction or with any approach to, if we want to say structured literacy versus balanced literacy, whole language versus phonics, all of those, she's not even a part of this, the discussion. I think that is a travesty, and I'll tell you why. After being dissatisfied with the subpar education and expectations offered to Black students during her 14-year tenure as a teacher in Chicago public schools, in 1975, she founded a low cost private school on Chicago's West Side. The premise was that all children can learn. And I remember going to education conferences as a doc student. And at that point, you're talking about, 2014, 2015, 2016. We were kind of like over saying, okay, we know all kids are capable of learning. We get it. All kids can learn. But I think we have to be reminded that that was revolutionary. And how what we're seeing now, we may have to go back to that basic premise and keep reminding folks that, right? In her classroom, whether in the public school or private school, working class students and those experiencing poverty were reading, writing, reciting, and debating at high levels. One critique of the science of reading is that it doesn't really teach about writing. Writing is not included, okay? And debating and all that. No, she engaged in what some would call comprehensive literacy, as opposed to the science of readings, structured literacy, or reading workshops, balanced literacy. So I've been throwing this around, but I'm just going to go real quick. Just try to help you to understand, just so that you can stay with me a little bit with all of this, like these reading terms. But structured literacy, so we have balanced literacy. Balanced literacy is more of like a fits. You will find it more in a workshop model, where we're including reading, writing, listening, and speaking, word study, assessments, And all of this works together to support the literacy development in students, not in only reading, but also in writing in these other areas as well. But they act like phonics was not a part of it. We can see phonics is a part of balanced literacy. Okay. And then we have structured literacy, which is through the science of reading. So you can see this is really mostly about reading and spelling, like reading words and spelling, not too much writing for the purpose of spelling, but not like process writing, which we got from the whole language movement, is one of the cousins of the whole, falls up under the whole language movement, one of the outgrowths of the whole language movement. Process writing, pre-writing, drafting, like really putting your ideas down and having something to say. um okay, so just kind of keep those in mind. So Marva Collins' comprehensive approach to literacy included intensive phonics instruction. So she did do intensive, probably more intense than the people that saying explicit phonics and all that. She did that. They read the classics and they wrote daily. Um, and as you can imagine, a black woman claiming expertise in an area that was dominated by white researchers, scholars, scientists, and educational psychologists, because they have a heavy influence on reading as well, and educators. And she was demonstrating success in her approach. It certainly brought with it a high level of scrutiny and disbelief. And it reminded me of a one summer when I was teaching summer school at the school I was teaching at, and we had to work with students over the summer for summer school who needed to improve their reading. And I got all into it. I was like, yes, I get to apply my what I learned as a lit because I wasn't working as a literacy clinician, but I had all of this know-how. I was like, I'm gonna do all this stuff. So the students had that I worked with, and two of them were special education students. They had improved their reading level. I used the assessments of the program. I didn't make my own assessments. I used their assessments. I mixed what I learned from the program and what I learned as a literacy clinician. They had improved their read quickly. And when I told the people who were over the literacy part of the school, they were like, "Oh no, they didn't do that. They didn't improve like that. No, that doesn't work like that." And I, being a little youngin' back then, I felt really defeated and I second guessed myself. I was like, well, maybe did they? But it's this type of stuff that happens to black educators in schools who pushes something differently. However, at a minimum, her approach to Marva Collins' approach to phonics instruction, given today's preoccupation with explicit phonics instruction, should be deeply studied and discussed alongside the science of reading. So this is a lot. Okay. I know this is a lot, but I just was trying to show you real quickly um, what phonics instruction is, just in case you don't know, and kind of like the progression. Because what I find and my critique of the way the balanced literacy approach, and not even just the balance, just like that we do not teach teachers. I don't think schools of education were saying don't teach phonics, but I do think we need to explicitly teach teachers how to teach phonics and what is a sequence of instruction of where to go. So if my kid knows this, what do I do next? What do I do next? And what do I do next? Right. So that you're keeping it moving and you're thinking about that. So here's a sequence of instruction, the science of reading. So they have, these are some before beginning, like the science of reading would say letter facts, 26 letters in the alphabet. This is they still believe in cursive, all of this stuff. Then you want to go once kids know all their letters and all that, and they can recognize them in and out of order. Then you go to consonant and short vowel sounds, and it includes all of this other stuff that you can ask me later if you want to know. Then you go to long vowel sounds and all of this stuff, and then you go to consonant vowel combinations. The balanced literacy would be, balanced literacy. They're just saying like the alphabetic principle is very important, that each sound has a letter representation. They're going to first learn the common consonant sounds, then they're going to learn the less common ones. They're going to get into all this. Okay, so we can talk about this later, but I want you to pay attention to how Marva Collins taught phonics. Now, this is an old video, and I want you to pay attention to what she's doing and how she does it. And listen to what she's saying. Oh, and those other approaches starts at kindergarten. They start at kindergarten, but let's see when her starts. Sorry.
I think many of us might have heard the saying of Ralph Waldo Emerson, that man is constantly astounded by common sense. What you're going to see is reading and reading comprehension, spelling, all simultaneously taught, made very simple. You will see 3, 4, and 5-year-olds beginning to read after just 1 month. Again, we hope that this phonics program will prove that many of the things that we've heard cannot be done with children is possible. What you're about to see is a daily ritual of how children learn to read. Again, the key is consistency, repetition, and drill. The children will repeat the sounds as you go through them each day. After just 3 weeks, several of the children in your classroom will be able to lead the children in this daily ritual. And this is how we begin. Block A, block A. A, Asia. A with the macron says A. A blinky says A. AI blank says A. Blank AY says A. AIGH says A. EIGH says A. EY says A. Remember, each child, the entire class, is repeating the sounds after you, the teacher, each day. Heartbeat, heartbeat. Brava. Cracking.
Okay, because of time, I'm gonna quickly go through this, but tell you what she's doing. So if we look here, they separate. What she's doing is she's combining the alphabetic principle, right? Letter facts, long vowel sounds, consonant sounds. What else? Complicated common law. She's also doing common long vowel digraphs, consonant and vowel combinations. So she's how she teaches um students to her phonics instruction is all at once at as early as 3 years old, as they're going through and learning letter recognition right up front. I think I would appreciate this approach because it's so confusing. Some of it we don't need, a lot of us don't even know how we learn how to read, how we learned how to read. But like just right from the beginning, you tell me like this is a long A sound. This is the letter A. And if we kept watching, you would hear the vocabulary words that she's using, that it's not just A is for apple. It's like reverse, replicate, like for 3, 4, and 5-year-olds, and they would learn how to read. And her goal was to quickly get them into reading classical literature. Okay, I know my time is running out, so I'm gonna say something real quick. Um, so when we think about the exclusion of Black educators at Black expertise, Black sciences in these discussions, and I just showed you a piece of her full comprehensive literacy program. This was just a tiny piece, but phonics is consuming the conversation right now, and I just want to say we got something to say about that too. Um, as Arlette Willis has shown, white supremacy is defended, justified, and maintained in education through scientific racism, even the use of the word science and what's considered science. Scientific racism is the use of scientific methods to position white ways of being and knowledge as superior to all others under the guise of objectivity, biology, genetics, brain research, or evidence-based research, neutrality, meritocracy, and more. Moreover, scientific racism is evident in the very notion of science and education policy, practice, and research. Scientific racism is in reading is in reading reform. Scientific racism in reading reform is advancing ideas that cognitive research alone can solve the reading problem without considerations of race, racism, and other social markers or forms of discrimination. Moreover, a very narrow science is being advanced to determine reading instruction. And the thing about it is that the science of reading has not, the studies of science of reading has not happened in classrooms. They have not dealt with race. And so this evidence based, so this is being enforced into policies without that work. Um, and I went to a science of reading training. I think there's things to learn, but I don't think that they own phonics instruction, as we can see with Marva Collins. Even to say that balanced literacy didn't have phonics instruction is not true. I do think certain teachers needed more support in doing it. We need to be honest about that. We don't need to over romanticize it. And our students did suffer for that. But that is also not true. So I would like the next iteration of how we view reading. I didn't get to go through the different views of reading because we're running out of time. But I would like the next iteration of how we view reading to incorporate the reading processes, expertise, and sciences of Black educators and scholars like Marva Collins. This will require deep and recovery archival work. If most Black children schooled in segregated schools from 1940 to 1970 were reading proficiently, why then would we not seriously research the reading instructional approaches of Black educators in segregated schools? Why wouldn't they be the first? Why wouldn't they be where we look first instead of where we look last, if we look at all? If we truly want to improve reading proficiency among Black students, significantly, whose research and what constitutes science, sound reading instruction, evidence, and evidence use matter in efforts to eradicate reading equalities. And I caution Black educators against taking any of these sides, even the ones that you thought were great. Really, probably was great because you made it great. But it itself, it probably wasn't like all of that. And the other thing is that we, even in the Soda Story podcast, you can hear they don't mention her race, all this color evasiveness. But when you hear a teacher, and she's a Black woman, that's a Black woman teacher talking that they have on there. And I see why science of reading is appealing, because we care about how our children's learn, and we want them to read. And we have those of us who really worked in schools, you worked with kids who want to learn how to read and they weren't given the skills that they need. And so I see why it's appealing, but we need to have more expansive understandings and consult what our own people have taught us. And I'm gonna stop there. I think I'm a little over on time.
At this time, if you have any questions, yes, and thank you, thank you, thank you. Uh, Lots of applause. Do we have,
Can I
let's,
make a comment?
oh, yes, absolutely.
Oh, okay. Um, I'm coming from the publishing world, educational publishing to be specific. I was doing ELA projects. And one day I woke up and it was like, science of reading is everything. And I was like, what? Like, where? How? And everything was about science of reading. Every publisher had a project. Everyone wanted to do it. It was one of those buzzwords that just went everywhere. And so I'm so happy that someone is doing research into Black contributions to this. I didn't learn those methods. My child knows them. She knows more phonics than I do because that's what they were teaching in her school. I was lucky that I was able to grasp reading really quickly without that phonics instruction, because I think there must have been kids with me in school who could not, and they didn't have the benefit of the phonics the kids have now because they just weren't doing it where I was in school at that moment. It wasn't the thing. And we were just learning more whole words and just get in there and
Mm-hmm.
read some stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really happy that someone is looking into this. I also feel like because it was such a buzzword, and I don't know how long it's going to stay a buzzword, I don't know if they're going to kind of flip back on it in X number of years or not, because there are kind of trends in education. That's how it goes. I usually, when I was working where I was working as a content developer, I focused on middle grade and above. So then when science reading came in, they were like, oh man, everyone needs a science reading expert and you're not it. And, I learned later that there's a science reading that extends through elementary school, through middle school, and goes even into high school. But because the buzzword was phonics, people weren't looking at it holistically and saying you still need a science of reading component all the way throughout. So again, I just want to, congratulate you on your work, and I'm glad you're out there.
Thank you.
Um, Hi, I'm Dewan. I'm not going to come off camera because I have my bonnet on. We black. I'm Dewan from DC. I've chatted with you in person and on Facebook, and it's a delight to be in space with you. Conversations like this make me understand that I am really a unicorn in the higher ed space, but also from my background. I was educated in private schools by Black folk in DC.
Yes.
Then I went to UDC where I was taught by Black professors who taught in Black schools. My professors taught my father in school, and I taught in DC where I taught Black children. And now I'm back at UDC as a professor. And so, what I understand about literacy and reading is as much as embedded in the curriculum as it is in the lived curriculum of the people who taught me. So when I have these conversations about science of reading with my students, I recognize that it really is packaging. And that's how I tell my students. It's also a means of accountability from districts because they want to be able to check off that we are fixing the reading crisis by doing X. The other part is that I've been in person with Emily Hansford at Planet Word, where she is the journalist in residence. And I have been in spaces where superintendents have come to DC to have conversations about science of reading. And what I'm hearing boots on the ground is that it is nefarious the way that they're using this the Mississippi Miracle is what we hear a lot about
Mm-mm.
now. And they're like, well, the fourth graders, Mississippi was first in the nation with fourth graders. That's because they retained half of the third graders. So we need to have really honest conversations about what's happening with the buzzword and understand that the science of reading is not something that was invented yesterday. The first
Mm-mm.
printed mention of it was in 1908. So they are
Yep.
picking up on something that's been around for a
Mhm.
century or more. And we have to understand the underlying aspects of what this means for our children and our families. So thank you so much for elevating this
Mhm.
conversation, elevating the history behind it. I would love to talk to you more about this because this is my jam right here. So thank
Yes.
you so much. I appreciate this so much.
And I want to say something to your point about them using the Mississippi, but we saw there's also journalism on the fact that when those same students got to 8th grade, they no longer were achieving
Yeah. And
because you can't right. Mm-hmm.
and just retain and then push. And then
Mm-mm.
that same superintendent is in Maryland now. And I was laughing because I'm like, let her try that in Maryland. Like, let's see how that replicates. Because it's not.
Mm-mm.
You're not going to be able to do the same things that you did with children, quite frankly, in poverty. And in a place where they're being steamrolled. So I appreciate this conversation. Again, I would love
Yeah.
to be in conversation with you more about this.
Yeah. And can I respond to Wine's question about are you saying that none of it? I really recommend that you check out the special issues, the 2020 and 2021 special issues of Reading Research Quarterly on the Science of Reading, where they brought together literacy researchers and cognitive sciences to talk about. And through those special issues, you will see that that's one of the main critiques that a theme is that it wasn't done in classrooms. So we need to know, we need evidence around how this is done in classrooms instead of just taking, they were done in randomized controlled trials through latent variable modeling where you're comparing two groups of students in an isolated, like in a separate almost like a laboratory in a way, but so it did work in those ways, but we don't know about in classrooms. So I do recommend that you check those special issues out.
I'd be remiss if I didn't say that I really appreciated you highlighting the work of a black teacher because within the world of literacy and literacy education, I feel like many of our black teachers are not recognized. And so kudos for that, first and foremost. Um, and then I also really appreciated you sharing the work that she was doing, even in the small clip, because it made me think about, and I'm going to read from my notes, that before decoding of words can happen, children must develop phonological awareness. And
Hmm.
so I love that she was having them do that. And I remember with my own son when he was as young as 3, people were amazed and were like, "How is he able to read?" I was like, "Yeah, because we have those fun activities that we did." And Dr. King can tell you about it because it kind of amazed our parents. They were like, "Look at him reading and stuff. How's he able to do that?" But he used to. I mean, his first word was apple because he was just always saying, ah, and he would make the sound and he would say a word, and it was fun for him. And so, yeah, our children are capable of far more than I think we give them credit for a lot of times, too. And so yeah, there's that. More credit for teachers, more credit for our children as learners, receptors, and as knowledgeable and capable. Yeah, all of that.
One of my former students, who is, I think, a therapist now, is here and said thank you. He was my middle school student. Okay. Makayla.
Hey, if you could hear me, I just want to say hey. It's Makai. This is so awesome too, and I'm glad I was able to sign up for this because I'm always interested in this stuff too, and it helps me educate not only my clients, but also too, I even need the kids that I work with as well on this stuff too, because I'm a big reader still, so
Very good.
it's always amazing to always support you too. So that's why I wanted to just say that and support you. Yeah.
Thank you. And you're a therapist, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I thought.
I think we have time for at least one more question. If anyone else had a question.
I don't have a question, but I never come on without saying anything. And I thank you for what you are doing. Back in the day, it was common practice for us to have phonics and things in school. And when it became not a practice, and I had a teacher who was teaching my granddaughter who was going to be fired if she continued to teach phonics,
Mm-hmm.
and she would not stop. And it helped my granddaughter become a top student going on to college with awards and everything. And I must say that after I retired and I would take groups of children in programs, I would bring those phonics games and teach those things because I knew how important it was. If they didn't learn how to read correctly, what else could we do? So I'm going to be quiet. I might not have said anything what you said on your subject, but I never come on without saying something and encouraging those who are still doing the work, who are still able to do the work. Keep it up.
And you know what, Miss Barbara, I'm so glad that you shared that because I do think that's something I'm trying to figure out how to fold into this conversation is that the way it's done, the way these reading words are discussed now is it's such a dichotomy. Like it's just, like you're either for basal readers or real text. Not both. You got to be like, right? You can't. When we saw black teachers were doing both, right? If you're for phonics instruction, then you're not having them doing real reading. Like you're just drill, and it's not real reading, and never. And it's like, it's not to say that we're not still doing literacy for liberation and for social justice and connected to our identities and our, but it's also like you have to. I do think black teachers is like, baby, you gonna get these skills now. We gonna Malcolm X all day, but come over here and make sure you can read all them words that Malcolm X said, right? And I do think, and so I appreciate you saying that, Miss Barbara, because I think that's very important. And I'm trying to fold that in even more. And I feel like that's the beauty of Black people and Black educators is that we're not this, is this or this. That's when I talk to colleagues, they be like, "Oh, you went to a science and reading training?" Yeah, I went to a science and reading training because maybe I could learn something. I'm gonna go see what it is first before I go. And I did learn some things. I have critiques, but I also learned some things, right? Because all I care about, if we ain't helping the babies, we ain't doing it. You can get on your podium all day and argue back and forth. But at the end of the day, and that's what we need to be doing. So
And I think we need to, I, again, I do appreciate you sharing that science of reading is not just a recent phenomena.
mm-mm, mm-mm,
Like, I mean, it's been kind of in practice. I know we like to hold on to in academia and stuff, buzzwords. I think right now SOR is the thing, but I've been trying to tell my students like and remind them like no, this isn't brand new. And I think by doing more of the research, highlighting more of the work of again our Black teachers, our teachers of color, our librarians, our
mm-hmm.
folks of color, like I think yeah, they're gonna get to see more of that because they need to see more of that, especially where more states too are trying to move towards this buzzword stuff. New York State's, we'll chat more, but New York State's kind of called on us, SUNY to do some work with science of reading. Fun times.
Mm-hmm. And I just want to say thank you, Dr. King. You all quiet, but thank you for inviting me, Dr. LeGarrette King.
Yes.
Thank you. Dr. LeGarrette King been encouraged me since I was a doc student at the conference.
This is your space to shine. So very proud of you and thank you, for your thing. But yeah, nobody can come hear me speak. So, thank you very much. Appreciate you. All right. So I think that's any other questions, concerns, thoughts, comments? All right, Tiffany's email is in the chat for those who like it. She's very personable, so you know. How's the baby?
The baby is doing good. She upstairs, so she wouldn't make no noise. So her father has her, but she doing good. Thank you.
Good, that's good. All right, good people. Until next time, we have Dr. Dixon, April 11th, a Canadian historian. So she's definitely going to, rock the house. So we hope to see everyone next nerd, second Saturday of each month. And thank you all for spending some Saturday time with us. And all the links to the conference information and micro credentials and um, nerd sessions are on our website. And Donovan, I'll put all those links in the chat. So please and encourage folks to come to the conference and encourage people to come to the nerd sessions. And thank you. All right. Can we start recording, Tina?
My sister and mother was here too.
Ah.